Algebra 1B, 8.5 factor. Goal in this first problem is to factor this completely. There are four terms, and if I look at all four of those terms, there's nothing that all of them have in common. There is no GCF that will go into all four of those terms. But thankfully, when there are four terms, there is another type of grouping that sometimes works, and we're going to try that method on this problem. So I'm going to group the first two terms together into one binomial and group the second terms together as well. For the first two terms, we're looking for a GCF. What goes into both of those terms? Well, between the 24 and the 15, I know 3 goes into both of them. V to the third and V to the second, I take the smaller one again, so V squared goes into both of them. Now, when I factor that out of this first term, 24V cubed divided by 3V squared gives us 8V. And then negative 15V squared divided by 3V squared is negative 5. So there is the first two terms factored with a GCF. Then, third and fourth term, they are grouped together also. The GCF here, what goes into both of those terms is a 4. If I factor a 4 out of both of those, we get 8V and negative 5. Now, I know it's possible, and I know I've done it correctly if what we have inside of parentheses is exactly the same. And that's the case this time. They are the same. So when we're looking at factoring this one, we're going to have 8V minus 5 as one set of binomials, and the other one is going to be from the GCFs. That's the 3V squared plus 4. And now this is factored completely. The way I know it's correct is if I were to multiply all of this stuff back out, and if it got me back to the original, then I know it's correct. All right, so on to problem number 2 here. There's 4 terms. There's no GCF that goes into all of them. So what we're going to do is group those 2 terms together, and then we're going to group these second 2 terms together. The 12V is negative, so I'm going to stick a little negative sign there and put a plus. So the leading coefficient inside of parentheses is still negative. And the negative 12V is the same thing I have, but there's a plus sign between them, and then there's a negative right next to that 12V. Next, GCFs. What goes into these first 2 terms? Well, that would be 7V squared. If you factor that out of both of them, we would get 2V minus 1. And then the GCF for these 2 terms is 6. But if we factor a 6 out of both of these, inside of the parentheses would lead off with a negative, and we don't want that. So we're actually going to be factoring out a negative 6. Negative 12V divided by negative 6 makes that a positive 2V on the inside, and that's good because I want that to be positive. And then 6 divided by this negative 6 is negative 1. We have the first 2 terms factored, the second 2 terms factored. And if it's possible, and if we did it correct, then what we have inside of parentheses has to be exactly the same, and it is. So inside of parentheses, we're going to have 2V minus 1, and then inside of the other parentheses, we're going to have 7V squared minus 6. We take those GCFs and put them in another one, and this is the correct factored form for that original problem. I can erase some of these parentheses, and if we multiplied this all back out, we would get back to that original. That's how I know I did it correctly. Just real quickly here, 7V squared times 2V, this term. 7V squared times negative 1 is that term. Negative 6 times 2V is that term, and negative 6 times negative 1 is that term. So now I'm feeling pretty confident that I did this one correctly, and there's our solution. Here is problem number 3, and we'll group the first 2 together, stick a negative sign right there, and group the last ones together. And I can do that again because there's no GCF that goes into all 4 of those terms. GCF here is going to be an 8m squared. It's really important you get the biggest common factor, not just a common factor. And when you factor that out, you're going to get 5m minus 6. And for the second set of parentheses, we're going to take out a negative 3. Inside of parentheses would be 5m minus 6 also. Good news, these are the same. So for our factored answer, we have 8m squared minus 3 times 5m minus 6. So here is one more example. It's problem number 4. There's no GCF for all of them, so we'll group and group. GCF here is 3v squared. Inside of parentheses is v plus 2. GCF here is 5. So inside of parentheses is v plus 2. The v plus 2's are the same. So in the factored form, we have v plus 2. And in the other set of parentheses is 3v squared plus 5.